Good evening. Good evening, everyone. My name is Phoebe Coleman. As this year's president of the Library of Congress Asian American Association, I want to welcome everyone here tonight. Thank you so much for joining us. We're very excited for this program. I also want to thank everyone who is tuning in on our YouTube and Facebook Live stream. Thank you as well. Tonight's program is co-hosted by the Library of Congress and the Library of Congress Asian American Association. This is one event in a series of programs offered in celebration of Asian American Pacific Heritage Month. Before I introduce, Before I introduce tonight's speakers, a quick housekeeping note, please silence your cell phones. We do want to encourage you to post during the discussion on social media with hashtag changemakers, but please do so with your cell phones on silent and make sure that that screen is turned down as well. This evening, the library's Chief Communications Officer, Roswell Encina, will be speaking in conversation with international best-selling author Kevin Kwan, whose book trilogy has forced the world to refocus its attention onto the complexities of Asia's elite. Crazy Rich Asians is now a major motion picture directed by John M. Chu. Both the books and the film have made such an international splash that they have garnered a place for Kevin on the 2018 Time 100, an annual list of the most influential people in the world. Kevin Kwan was born and raised in Singapore, where he attended Anglo-Chinese school in the mornings and spent his afternoons either hiding from his Chinese tutor or riding his bike after the neighborhood dogs. When he was 11, he moved to the United States, where he survived high school by immersing himself in the writings of F. Scott Fitzgerald and Joan Didion. Kevin has degrees from both the University of Houston and the Parsons School of Design. So I shall stop there. Without further ado, please help me welcome on stage Roswell Encina and Kevin Kwan.
Well, good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming. So we have our special guest here tonight, Kevin Kwan. You've been having a fabulous several years, I should say. You've been the toast of the literary world, from Anna Wintour to Hollywood. How's it been?
I'm still in shock, I think. It's been pretty amazing, and I feel really, really grateful that, people showed up tonight, Thank you.
During Phoebe's introduction to you, she mentioned that you were born in Singapore and you moved to Houston when you were about 11 years old, if I'm correct. Tell me more about your family, just to give us some background and give us a little genesis leading up to the book. Just based on the books, you could say that, were you part of Asia's 1%, or was your family part of it? Did you experience everything in the book?
We were comfortable, as we would say.
Nick would say.
Now, as growing up as a kid, you don't really have a context of what is really privilege and who's really well off and who's not. And I would say, as a child, I did not feel like I came from the 1%. To clarify, I don't come from the 1%. But, I think I grew up in a very old money family. The money was many generations old, and by this time dusty and dissipated. And we lived in my grandparents' house, and by this time it was very, it was all about thrift. Like, I didn't have any toys growing up. I didn't have any clothes. I ran around naked. No. A lot of, I wore hand-me-downs, basically. I had two older brothers. I wore their clothes, basically. I played with toys that were like 3 decades old. But I wasn't conscious of the fact that I was like deprived or anything like that. I had a very happy, idyllic childhood. It's only in contrast to, I would go over to friends' houses, for example, and then I would get very jealous because I grew up in this big old house with, strange wood floors and old antiques, and my friends had wall-to-wall carpeting. They lived in apartments with elevators, and to me that was cool. They got to sleep in bunk beds. I got to sleep in this old antique wooden bed. So as a child, you just want what's different.
But thinking back,
Thinking back,
really cool, though.
Thinking back, it was very cool. I wish I'd taken more pictures.
If Instagram only.
Yeah, I wish I still had my childhood bed, stuff like that. But it was only after leaving Singapore and settling in suburban Houston that I realized, oh wow, I did have a privileged upbringing because, only 5% of the population of the island actually lived in houses. 95% had to live in what I thought were cool apartments, So I was very sheltered in a way.
Let's talk about the books here.
Yeah.
So, and the movie, of course. So most of the books are seen from the eyes of Rachel, an Asian American woman who grew up here in the States. And was that a conscious decision? I feel like most Asians here in America feel like, oh, we're Asian until you pretty much go to Asia, go to our native countries, and you feel, I don't want to say we feel less Asian, but we feel like completely fish out of water. Was that the point that you wanted to show?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I specifically wanted to show the experience of an Asian American experiencing Asia for the first time and seeing a different side of, her cultural heritage. Actually, it wasn't her cultural heritage because her family came from mainland China, and she was experiencing this very different, group of overseas Chinese living in Singapore. And so I wanted her to be the complete outsider, not realizing she was an outsider until she stepped into that world, which in many ways is how I felt after I left Singapore. I really did become an outsider of the country. And I would remember cousins coming to visit from Singapore and things like that, and they'd always go, you're just so white, you're a banana, you're too Americanized, you don't really get it. And so I really, had a kinship with Rachel in that sense, of not really belonging to those people anymore, but also not really fitting in America because I wasn't American-born Chinese. I was this other.
I could relate a little bit. I was born in the Philippines, that we moved here, then we moved back there. Anyway, that's another story. But you are viewed
Probably more
differently.
interesting.
I don't know about it. We're viewed differently.
Yeah.
You do stick out like a sore thumb. But I should say, though, after reading these books, I had two feelings. I wanted to call my mother. I'm not sure why, but I don't know. My mother's not like Eleanor, maybe a little bit. But,
Yeah.
But I was hungry after reading these books. And I feel like you nailed it, from the food to the jewelry, to the clothes, to the geography, to the real estate. How much pressure were you to get this all right and all correct? I should say, Asians tend to be a little critical if you do this a little wrong.
Yeah, it really, because I was writing this for myself and it was just this passion project, I really didn't feel any pressure at all. And this is me in the complete freak that I am. You know what I mean? Like if I thought I was actually writing this for an audience of readers, I really would have censored myself. I would not have put so many brand names in. I would not have spent 2 pages describing a living room, or like a whole chapter on food and going to a party. But I just had fun, and I love reading about food. I love reading books that have scenes of parties and food where they describe the food. And so I was really truly writing this for myself. And so if it made you hungry, then I'm so glad. Because I wanted to write an appetizing book.
I said, keep on writing about the books and the
Yeah.
fashion. I mean, you nailed
Yeah.
it from describing the jewelry that I'm not really good at, but just describing the clothes and the designers. Did you have to get permission from the designers to mention them and kind of take liberty at what?
Not
the
at all.
designs
It's it's fiction. You can do whatever you want.
What kind of feedback
Yeah.
did you get from the designers? I know Anna Wintour wrote something up in Vogue, so
Yeah.
that is a ginormous deal, I should say.
I mean, she was one of the first people that really championed the book, and I'm forever grateful because she put it on the map, and serialized it in Vogue, and that was, I think, one of the few things that really helped make it succeed. But I think over the years I've met many, many designers who have really been very grateful, because not only is it a look at Crazy Rich Asians, but it gets the fashion world right, and it gets that sort of consumer and that customer and client base right, and they've been happy. You know, last year I was able to meet Jean-Baptiste Valli, who I featured in a scene in Rich People Problems, you know, and he was very happy about that. So, you know, it's nice to sort of meet these people once in a while.
Now, one of the questions I was asking my friends, what should I ask you? Ask them if any of this stuff is true. So there's a lot of over-the-top stuff, from the opening scene in Crazy Rich Asians of, you know, Eleanor, Nick's parents buying the hotel, to Colin's wedding, and further on in the books to Nick's proposal to Rachel, to everything else, and the purchase of that $195 million piece of art in China Rich Girlfriend. Are any of this based on truth, or is there's a little sliver of truth in any of these stories?
I would say it's absolutely based on truth. I mean, most of, you know, I always say I don't really have an imagination. You know, I really don't. I mean, I observe, and I've always been a sponge. And so all the stories I tell are rooted in an original truth. And they're authentic to, you know, a famous scandal or a famous story. You know, so, and I think that's what makes it so fun for a lot of the Asian audiences from the Philippines or from Hong Kong or from Singapore, because they recognize these stories. And I've just respun them a little bit, you know, just to make them very fun.
Can you name one which stories true? I know you told Terry Gross on Fresh Air that the scene, the hotel scene at the very beginning, is based on something real. Could you tell
Absolutely.
that story?
Yeah, I mean, the hotel scene that kicks off the whole series, Crazy Rich Asians, you know, Nick Young and his family arrived to London late one night. This is back in the 80s when he's a little child, and they're turned away at the hotel because their last name Young, you know, the hotel management did not realize that they were going to be Chinese, you know, and so they were turned away, and they ended up buying the hotel. And that's very much inspired by a real story of a Chinese family I know, which had an interesting, ambiguous, you know, last name as well, that they were going to spend the entire summer in England, and they showed up late one night at a hotel on a rainy night, and they were turned away.
Then what happened?
So they threatened to either buy the hotel or put an ad in every English-speaking newspaper around the world, just recounting their experience. And they got the rooms, yeah. But it's no coincidence that at least 3 of the top hotels in London are owned by Singaporeans.
Wow.
So, yeah.
It would be funny to find out if it was based on one of those experiences. Another thing that what I love the most about these books, it's like your to-do guide of, it's like your own personal Professor Higgins of My Fair Lady. It pretty much tells you how to be a posh, rich Asian. There's one line here, and I realize I don't have my glasses, so excuse me that I'm squinting. So there's one here. In China Rich Girlfriend, there's a whole part here where I think her name's Corinna. It's telling Kitty what to wear, what not to wear, what to buy, what not to buy.
She's the social consultant, you know.
Yes.
And these people really do exist in Asia. They you know, they have these.
Wait, before I talk about that,
okay,
yes, let's talk about this.
Yeah.
These people really exist. Like, what do? You really go out there. I'm gonna turn you into my Eliza Doolittle. Is that what it is?
You know, I think a lot of, especially new money families, they want to be taken seriously by, you know, the old society, and they want to enter society. Especially a lot of the mainland Chinese families, you know, they're trying to buy respectability. And so they hire these consultants to really help them. And in a very tangible way, they get them into the best clubs, you know, they get their children to the best schools.
Get them to the right church.
Exactly.
So let me read some passage from here. It says pretty much what to discontinue. Discontinue the use of nail polish in red or any shades of red. Yes, pink is a shade of red. This is non-negotiable. You must remember that we have the Herculean task of removing any connotations of talons, claws, or grasping hands from your person. So, and there's a couple more here, like stop riding in your Rolls Royce, buy a BMW like everyone else. Where did you learn all this stuff? I mean, it's very detailed. This is not all out of your imagination. This has to be based on some real.
Like I said, it's all from
model.
Observation and from eavesdropping and overhearing these conversations, you know, of of very snobbish aunties, basically going, oh, did you see that person? Did you see them at church last Sunday and what she wore, or did you see this person at this wedding and she changed 4 times and she's not even related to the bride, but she showed off like 4 different Chanel outfits. So, it's a very curious, fascinating world to me. And so I love to sort of capture it and put it in these books.
One thing you did a great job is, there's a lot of serious subject matters in here, but you were able to write about it in a fun way. But the main topic is the differences between class and race, you just mentioned, between rich China mainlanders over the rich Singaporeans, over old money versus new money, skin colors. So you were able to confront this issue that most Asians don't like talking about, honestly, between being elitist and honestly being racist. How were you able to write about it but still find some humor in it?
I think snobbery in all its forms has always been fascinating to me, because I don't understand it quite, So when I meet someone that is snobbish, I just want to dissect them, Like what makes them tick? Why do they feel this way? Why is their worldview informed by achievement or wealth or lineage? Because, I think we're all the same, basically, So to me, it's very comical almost when I meet someone that's affected. Yes. So I love to make fun of them in my books.
And it gets you. But it's so true. I could see what you were talking about in Singapore. It's almost the same thing in the Philippines. Like if you're living in, and you mentioned some of the exclusive subdivisions of the Philippines, like Forbes Park and Dasmariñas. If you lived there, you really felt like you were something, compared if you were living, let's say, in Pasay City or another small part of Metro Manila. But you could tell the tension of people just being a little thumbing their nose at these folks. So I think you nailed that perfectly. Were you able to talk to people from different parts of Asia, like how it is in Singapore over how it is in Shanghai over how it is in Hong Kong?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I traveled there too, so I really sort of experienced front row snobbery. And it's funny because I'm recounting one visit to the Philippines where I was with a very, very stylish, posh lady, and she wanted to get some fruit for us for dinner, and we passed by one of these street side stands, and she took off all her jewelry, took off her watch, and she walked out and was buying some jewelry, and there was a 6-year-old kid, and he was boss man. And he would not lower his prices, And she's trying, but he was like, nope. That to me, these little moments, it's hilarious. And you see that, those juxtapositions, are fascinating.
The snobby part is one. The racism is another big thing I feel like we don't talk about. But you nailed it well with Astrid's brother, who married, I believe, a woman from Malaysia who had darker skin. Despite we chuckle about it in the book, this happens a lot. And was this based on someone, or were you able to see this a lot happening?
Yeah, I mean, this was based on someone I actually knew, and it's unfortunately all too common experience. When families have expectations of their children that they marry the right sort of person from the right family, and they don't do that, it leads to a lot of unhappiness, unnecessary unhappiness for a lot of people. So, and there's all this sort of very cross-ethnic racism that really does exist.
It's very troubling. I mean, and it's sad that many families disown their sons and daughters because of something really not important. So let's lighten it up a little bit. Another thing that what you tackled in the book is the relationships, or how it's focused on women. Because most of the books are, focused on Rachel or on Astrid, on Colette, on Kitty, and the relationships among the women between Eleanor and Rachel, Eleanor and her friends. Was that important to you to showcase the Asian woman in these books?
I think it was important, also just very natural for me, and it's part of my experience. I think growing up in a family where the women really ruled. From my grandmother to my mother, these are extremely strong personalities, and I have lots of also very fierce aunties, So growing up, and even to this day, you really feel the influence of the women on the families, and how they really sort of, create the drama.
I like the interaction between Eleanor and her friends, just between them being extravagant and purchasing jewelry, but could be ridiculously cheap, and buying, let's say, something off the street, or buying like a shirt or something from a cheap store. Was that based from your family or any families that you know of?
I think it's definitely based on people I know. Yeah, just the contrast between how rich you are and how extraordinarily cheap you can be is to me just so comical, because they will go out of their way to be uncomfortable or to inconvenience themselves to save an extra, literally 5 cents,
Exactly.
and make other people suffer. And it's almost a strange form of snobbery, of this competition of like, how cheap can I be? And that reinforces how wealthy I am,
Speaking of snobbery, some of this reads almost like the Real Housewives of, Singapore or Hong Kong or Shanghai.
I've never seen those shows, so.
Well,
Yeah.
you wrote the Asian version of it.
Yeah.
So between what happens between Colette and Kitty,
Yeah.
it is funny, the competition between these rich women. Have you experienced that firsthand?
Oh yeah.
Could you give us some stories?
I mean, I took those stories and I put them in the books. Really. But yeah, I mean, like I said, to me, it's just always so fun to see what people see as important in this world, and the lengths they'll go to really, it's about acceptance, really. It's, Kitty Pong to me, she's one of my favorite characters to write about, because I always root for the underdog, and this was a girl that came from absolute nothing, and she just wants to succeed, and nothing is gonna stop her. And, she'll ingeniously try to just climb her way to the top.
We're not giving away anything, by the way, if you haven't read the other
Yeah.
two books. I have to be honest, my favorite character is probably, and I'm embarrassed to even admit this, is Eddie.
Yeah, he's a lot of people's favorite characters.
I think
yeah.
I just want his clothes more than anything, but, and I think I know several people almost like him. And I think about it, you don't have to be rich to have Eddie's mindset. I mean, his mind is all appearances.
Yeah.
And I think just based on how the world is now, it's a world full of Eddies.
Yeah.
Because they want to show off what they have on Instagram and everything else. And it seems to be like the perfect kind of platform for Eddies out there.
It is, and he really became one of my favorite characters to write, because every time I would get to a chapter to write about him, I would just laugh myself, silly as I was typing, remembering something, inspired by the real Eddies that I know. And it's interesting how he's become really a crowd pleaser. People love to hate him, so it's really fun to see that.
There was an article in The Guardian that pretty much said that Crazy Rich Asians kind of threw away the normal stereotypes that Asians have. Do you agree with that?
Absolutely. I think we invented new stereotypes, right?
Yes. Was that a conscious decision so people will look at, forget the old stereotype and try to project something new?
Absolutely, yeah. I just wanted to show, beyond the stereotypes that you do see, I wanted to really show different facets of different types of people that exist in Asia. And I hope you see that, beyond the snobby Eddies and the Kitties, there's more nuanced characters that are hopefully, much more realistic and have a whole spectrum of emotions and desires.
I do want to ask you some, maybe I won't call them serious questions, but it's what's happening in the world right now. There's a lot of talk about the trade war, and I'm not pretending that I'm an economist of any sort, or you are either, but just based on from who you've been talking to, how would that affect the 1%ers of China? Would they feel it, or would it be passed on to the average Chinese? How does it work there?
I think the world operates similarly. The 1% never seem to suffer, whether it's in China or America, and everyone else has to carry the burden, especially the not 1%s. So I think, yeah.
On the same kind of line, these countries don't really have a good track record when it comes to human rights and LGBT rights.
Yeah.
How do these one percenters face these? They clearly have to live there,
Yeah.
or do they?
But they don't.
Yeah.
You know, I think there is a lot of sort of intentional myopia, you know, where people in these circles, you know, they live in gated communities. They don't really see how the other half lives. They get to their airports, they fly to Paris, they fly to New York, they fly to London. They take their children, they educate them in the West. So, you know, I think a lot of times it's intentional, the oblivion that happens with the 1%. And that's not just in Asia, that's around the world.
Yes.
You
It's
know.
easier just to move to London or move
the
to
rich
the
just
States.
insulate, basically.
Let's talk about the movie.
Yeah.
So the book came out, you know, 2013, 2012?
2013.
2013. So there's, you know, it's been a runaway bestseller since then. So you must have been approached by Hollywood several times. How was that process? How hard was it to make this book into a movie that you wanted?
I wouldn't say it was hard. It was just, we had to have a lot of patience and resilience. It took 5 years, you know, from the time I made the deal to adapt the book into a movie. That was 2013, June, and the movie finally came out in August of 2018. And I'm told by a lot of Hollywood insiders, actually it was fast, you know, because the average book to movie is about 8 to 12 years. So I consider myself lucky in that sense. But I think we wanted to take our time and really, because I felt like if we have this opportunity to tell the story and assemble an all-Asian cast, we have to do it right. We have to really find the best screenwriters to really adapt the story. We have to find the best director, to find the best cast, and all that took time. And so I think it really, everything fell into place the way it did in the most magical way and in its own time, and I'm very grateful for that.
You mentioned all Asian cast, which is not, Hollywood does not have a good track record on
No.
this. I should say that the last movie that had an all Asian cast was The Joy Luck Club, which was 25 years
Yeah.
before this one, and maybe 32 years.
And it was a hit.
And it was a hit.
And it was a hit, but
And-
Hollywood ignored that.
32 years before The Joy Luck Club, I guess all other Asian American cast was
Flower Drum Song
with your relative,
with
Nancy
my cousin
Kwan.
Nancy Kwan.
So
yeah.
it went from the 60s to the 90s to 2018. That's not good.
No.
So, was that a deal breaker for you to make sure that the entire cast stayed all Asian American?
I don't even think it was a deal breaker. It wouldn't have even been a consideration.
I heard some
You
stories
know.
though. You said no to Netflix, and some other, I guess I won't say, I'm not sure which studio,
Yeah.
offered that to turn Rachel's character to a Caucasian woman.
That was very early on. So back in 2013, when Hollywood was first sniffing around, you know, a very important production team came to us, you know, with one of the first proposals, like, oh, we were very interested in this story, but Rachel needs to be white. And my agent didn't even tell me about it for a while, you know, because she knew you don't even get it. And so we're not even gonna have this conversation. But after that, everyone that did wanna do it, you know, they wanted to be true to the story. And I think at that time they were fascinated by the possibilities of doing an English language movie that would work really well in Asia. That was more the draw. They didn't know if it would do well in America, they didn't really care, and we were gonna make an independent movie. So Hollywood and what Hollywood wanted was irrelevant.
So there was
At that time.
There was one big headline that says that you and the director said no to Netflix, and that was the big deal. What's that story about?
You know, it's been sort of blown up, and I mean, it was a very interesting time. You know, this was after we had really assembled the team. John Chu was going to direct it, Michelle Yeoh and Constance Wu were going to star. We had an amazing script, and we basically took it out to market. And at that time, many movie studios were interested in now taking on the movie, as was Netflix. And Netflix came to us with a very, very compelling offer. And you know, I love Netflix, first of all.
I love Netflix
I'm
too,
the
by
number
the way,
one
Netflix.
Netflix addict, you know, so it wasn't about this not wanting this to be on Netflix, because I think they do some incredible, very artistic, boundary-pushing work. But we had this opportunity now, you know, for the first time. It's the first all-Asian cast in 25 years. So we asked Netflix, like, how do we quantify this success? How do we show that this is going to be a success? Because for us, that's important. If we want there to be a future for other movies made by other Asian directors or other Asian writers, like we have to show some sort of financial track record. And they couldn't sufficiently answer that question at that time. Things have changed now, since then. But at that time, we really felt we needed to show the box office possibilities. And you can only do that in an old-fashioned movie, where by Sunday evening, you know how well it's done.
Was that important for you, that it had to be from a major studio? Because it does make a statement,
It's not even that it was a major studio. We wanted to be able to show the world that, either we fail, and you can see that we failed, or we succeed, but you can see the success right there. Number one. Number two, I felt like, because I wanted to be true to my readers, and I know my readers are multi-generational. My books are read from teenagers to adults to, older adults. I knew that this could be a community experience. I knew this could be a multi-generational community experience, and I wanted that to happen. And it's just not the same when you're sitting on your couch clicking on a box than going to the movies, and allowing our amazing actors to walk a red carpet and have a premiere and really sort of celebrate the victory of getting this movie made.
Being nominated for Oscars.
Yeah, exactly. So we wanted, we had to kind of go old-fashioned to be able to prove that this can be done, so that other movies after us would have a chance.
Rolling the dice paid off then, right?
It ultimately did, yeah.
So a lot of descriptions been saying ooh, Crazy Rich Asians is historic, it's the tipping point. Do you think it is? You're more, I guess, in tune with how Hollywood is thinking now. Do you think this is changing, is the wave changing?
I think it's a start. I think there is still a very, very, very tall mountain to climb. Because, it's been how many months now? How many more movies have come out, with all Asian casts? So there's stuff in the works, but there needs to be much more. And more people need to keep pushing, and the community needs to keep being vocal to say, we want this. We want to see diverse stories being told. We want to see people of different skin tones represented on the screen and on TV, because it's still, I think, to me, in my experience, and I've been working in Hollywood now for the past 2 years, most of the people in power still do not get it. And I think a lot of them think that Crazy Rich Asians was just a fluke.
The beauty is, I think we're seeing more Asian Americans in movies. Though I can't remember her name. The woman, the actress who played Astrid, was in Captain Marvel.
Yes.
She was playing a character who was not supposed to be Asian American or Asian, and she was able to take that role. And Henry Golding was in that movie with Anna Kendrick. So I think we're seeing them in more Hollywood-type movies.
Yeah, that's two. That's just two.
I think you're right.
Yeah, and it's a start. Awkwafina, the actors from Crazy Rich Asians have all done extraordinarily well, and I'm so happy for them. They've all blown up. They've all become superstars. But there needs to be way more. Other actors that weren't in my movie, I want to see them succeed. I want to see them on big movies and in TV shows and on Broadway,
Speaking of future movies, so when are these two books going to be turned into movies?
Yeah, so we are working now on adapting books 2 and 3, and the plan is to shoot them together next year in 2020.
Oh, yay.
Yeah.
Do you have a say in the screenplay and make sure it at least stays, the integrity of the books stays in the movies?
I have a voice, basically. And, like I said, we've always been a team. And it's a very interesting collaboration. And so, yeah, I think I feel like they want to be as true to the books as possible. Knowing full well that, a 500-page book is very different from an hour and 45-minute long movie. But I've always been involved.
Before we take questions from the audience, I was scrolling through IMDb earlier, and I had no idea you were in the movie. Were you?
Was I?
You were credited. And I didn't see you, so I just want to make sure I didn't miss it.
I was there for a millionth of a second.
Where was it?
Blink and you'll miss it. I'm in the montage when they start texting and the news goes around the world. Yeah, yeah. So I'm in that montage. John Chu's daughter, infant daughter was in the montage too. So, it's funny like how we hit a lot of things in there. Yeah.
And one last question for me. So I read all 3 books. Will there be a 4th? I'm thinking now that, not giving anything away,
Yeah.
it was all tied up nicely.
Mm-hmm.
There's possible grandchildren on the horizon.
Yeah.
Like a sequel of Crazy
Yeah.
Rich Grandparents,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I would love to revisit this family and these people again, but not right now. At the moment, I'm writing 2 different TV shows, and I have a whole new series of novels planned. Yeah. Thank you. There are other families I want you all to meet and read about and fall in love with.
Speaking of which, when could we expect your next book to come out, or anything else?
The next book. Ooh, don't hold me to it.
Yeah.
But
Is your editor watching the live?
she might be. I don't know. Where are you, Jenny? 2021, 2020. I don't know.
That's good news.
It depends when I start writing. If I go home and start writing now, possibly.
All right. Let's take some questions from the audience. So we have some staff members that'll be going up and down
wow.
the staircase with a microphone. So just raise your hand, and Kevin will call on you.
There's even more people than I expected. Wow.
Okay, well, thank you very much for a very nice interview. I'm very curious about the role you created for Rachel Chu. So it's a kind of unusual to frame the lead character in a popular movie as a professor of economics who specializes in game theory. Can you tell us a little about, what made you frame that role in that way?
Rachel was inspired by a few different women I know, who are very strong, very smart, very beautiful. So I wanted to do them justice, number one, and I didn't want her to be doing something that was just too typical, like if she was just a lawyer or a doctor. I wanted to give her an interesting career. And I also live right by NYU. Like, I'm a block away, so, it was very easy to sort of invent her character and visualize her in that world. Yeah. Back there.
Hi, good evening. My name is David Yao. I'm the festival director for the DC's APA Film Festival, which incidentally is coming up May 31st to June 2 down at the Naval Memorial. Come check it out. Kevin, about a month and a half ago, I had the pleasure of bringing Adele Lim to Washington, D.C. to give a couple of talks about her experience of working with you on the Crazy Rich Asian as the screenwriter. Can you tell me a little bit about what's the working procedures, how to translate your book with so much details into the film, which was not long enough, and with so many, and a couple of inserts that she put in. How do you strike the balance? What was the process?
Well, for me, I really knew that I was not the expert to do this, and I was also too close to the material. So I really wanted to really give my book to the smartest kids in the room and the best in the business to really adapt it. And so I gave them really free rein. I said, take the book, find the stories in there you think will craft the movie that you want to make. And I was consulted along the way. I was always available for questions, so I had lots of conversations, particularly with Pete Chiarelli, who was one of the first to really work on the script. And slowly but surely, a story was built. And I'm thrilled with the results. But I think the important thing was for me to step away and not screw with it. Yeah. Hi.
Hi. Have you always wanted to be a writer, and how have your parents/family responded to your success?
I really only wanted to start writing when I was in college. I was a media studies major, so I was at that time much more interested in journalism and working for magazines. And I always thought in my mind, okay, I have a story to tell. I'll maybe tell it when I'm retired. You know, I'll try to write a novel in my 60s or 70s or something like that. And fate intervened, and I ended up, you know, doing what I did at an earlier age. The second part of your question was how has my family reacted? They've been really supportive. I mean, they've been really surprised because I didn't tell anyone I was writing a book. So I think it was only maybe a month before the book was released that I told my family, oh, I'm writing this book. It's called Crazy Rich Asians. And I remember my aunt from Singapore called me up several times pleading with me to change the name of the book. And, you know, I didn't.
How has the Asian American community responded to the books? Both here in Asia, actually, the
Yeah.
Asian Americans here in the US and Asians in Asia.
From my experience, it was a very different experience. Because when Crazy Rich Asians first came out, it was an instant bestseller in Asia. In Singapore, it was sold out. In Hong Kong, Malaysia, they got it, loved it immediately. I think the Asian American audience is a little more skeptical. And, you know, and naturally so, because, you know, we've done such a shitty job for so long representing Asian Americans that I think naturally when this book first came out in the US, there was a bit of skepticism amongst Asian Americans as to like, what is this? You know, why is it being called Crazy Rich Asians? But slowly, through word of mouth, you know, the popularity grew. And I think they don't really hate me that much anymore.
I don't think they do. So
Yeah.
we'll take
Thank
one
you.
question.
Hi, my wife and I saw your film. We loved it. It's fantastic.
Thank you.
I was wondering, do you ever encounter anyone who's concerned that, particularly in mainland China, with all the newfound wealth, that philosophy, history, culture, Confucian values might get displaced by hyper-consumerism?
I do encounter a lot of those people, and actually those are issues that are very much discussed in China Rich Girlfriend. You know, it's really that struggle between tradition and what used to be and this audacious society of new money, you know, where it's all about materialism and spending and showing off. So it's that really was one of the core issues I tried to look at in that book, and have had many conversations with a lot of you know, mainland Chinese people who are concerned about the future of their country and the soul of their country. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you for speaking to us. So the book has received quite a bit of praise. I'm curious, in terms of the criticism that you've received, what sort of interesting pieces that you've taken away from folks who either don't like the book or just critical of the book in general?
Yeah. You know, I've been really, really lucky because the books, for the most part, have been overwhelmingly liked by critics and by, you know, the public as well. The few criticisms I've heard are that it's really boring. You know, once in a while I'll get comments, it's boring, there are too many characters, you can't keep track of them, why so many brand names, you know. But those are the things that I think a lot of other people like about my books. So it's, you know, it's sort of hard. But beyond that, I think in Singapore, you know, there's one faction that really feels like this overemphasizes the Chinese privilege that exists there and doesn't really look at the other minority groups that are in Singapore. And I think that's very valid, but that's not the world I wrote about or know about. So I could only write about the Chinese privilege that's in this book.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Could you shed some light about how was the publishing process? My general idea is that many people write, but it's very difficult to get it published.
Yeah.
How was your experience? How did you what was your breakthrough?
Yeah, I was tremendously lucky. So I had worked behind the scenes, you know, as a creative consultant. I had a lot of publishing clients, so I sort of knew how the business of publishing worked. And I've also published other books before the Crazy Rich Asians series. And I wrote a book about luck. It's a nonfiction book. I've done other books for other authors. This was my first real passion project. And you know, of course, when you write something that's so personal, there's a lot of fear about, you know, who's going to want to read this or care about it. So I showed it to a few key people that I really respected, and the response was overwhelmingly positive. And they sort of, you know, I had a really good friend. She sort of forced me to find an agent for the book. And I very luckily, you know, found an amazing agent. She was a very young junior agent at the time, but is still my agent, and she really believed in the book. And, you know, really, really found the right publishers that also believed in it. So I was lucky from the start in that so many authors, I think first-time novelists, it's the hardest genre to break into. You know, it's easier to sell a book about shoes or ties, you know, because there's going to be a captive audience of people that want to read about shoes or ties. But to create a whole world and to convince someone to spend money and time to invest in that world, it's always the hardest to break through. I have so many friends that, you know, have tried repeatedly to get their books published with, you know, with no success. But I've been just extraordinarily lucky, so I'm very grateful. Yeah.
Hi.
Hi.
Hi, my name is Ann House Quinn, Quinn. I think I'm going to change it to QWINN because you are so impressive. But I wanted to tell you I'm a guest of David Yao. And Penny, where's beautiful Penny from Singapore? Okay, Penny, my dear friend, said, you've got to read Crazy Rich Asians for your book group. I said, Penny, I work for NAMI, the National Alliance on Mental Illness. That is so un-PC. Your book is incredible, but I want to ask you, when are you going to bring up the Crazy Rich Asians at the elite boarding schools in the United States? My daughter goes to one. So the schools where JFK attended, they are now being heavily populated by Asian students. And it's amazing how they're running the newspaper, they're running the orchestras, the science clubs.
I'm gonna cut my hair and go back to school and be a covert spy.
Okay.
Yeah. Because that's the only way I'll be able to write about them.
Or a dad.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for the idea.
We'll take 2 more questions.
Yeah.
Oh, hi.
Hi.
I think I need to overcome my introverted self, or maybe shy self, and
I'm an introvert too, so.
speak, even though part of me needs to say, just like Rachel Chu, that I am enough. And this is going to be interesting enough to everybody. But I just have to say, when I read about you and John Chu, I'm going to get emotional. When I read about you crying on the phone, when you made the Netflix decision, it just made me cry because, I mean, that's the whole thing is just making me feel like I'm in a new world. And also just the fact that it's just you never hear about people like just doing things for the right reason and not motivated by money. And I don't know, it just really meant so much to me. And and then also just hearing you tweet out, you know, looking for the next Asian American superstars, like I never thought I would read something like that in my lifetime, you know? And I guess all my life, you know, I've said things like, you know, with God, all things are possible, but part of me is like, well, why did I really need to see Crazy Rich Asians to really, but I guess that's why, you know, it's important for there to be the first best actor and best actress that were African American. Or, you know, there still isn't the first Asian American on the cover of Vogue. It's like these things are important to see, you know? And I just feel like now, you know, it gives me motivation to try, whereas before, no matter how much in any of the things that I'm good at, like no matter how much positive feedback I got, it's just like, well, why is there motivation to work when there's no jobs? It's like, I do it for me, you know? But maybe this is like my motivation to, you know, put myself out there, and it meant a lot, your tweet. And I literally even flew from Los Angeles to be here today because I didn't hear about your other events in time. And I just thought maybe kind of like Constance Wu wrote the letter to John Chu, like she just wanted to tell him how she felt. Like I just wanted to tell you how you felt.
Thank you. Thank you.
We'll take one last question.
Hi.
There's another lady up there. I'm going to let her speak.
Thank you. Hi. I like to thank you so much, Mr. Kwan, for describing the Straits Chinese Peranakan culture in your books and displaying its beauty in the movie. How has this unique overseas Chinese hybrid culture of East and West influenced your expression as an Asian author? As a proud Peranakan myself, I'm curious to find out.
You know, the fact that people have embraced this world and the fact that I'm hearing comments like this, it's so inspiring to me to keep on wanting to do what I do and to really tell more stories and really tell more diverse stories of different types of Asians from all over the world. So, thank you. Yeah.
I want to thank everyone who came here tonight. I know many of you were here earlier during the screening of the movie, so we appreciate you spending the night with us. Also, if you don't have a book, we're selling books outside. Kevin will be signing books next door in our Woodall Pavilion. So on behalf of the Library of Congress, thank you and good night.
Thank you. Thank you.